Well, good morning, everybody. That was kind of a harsh sound already this morning, that banging of the gavel. It is Thursday, July 25th, 2019. This is the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. It is 7:33, and we are calling the meeting to order. And roll call, please. Ms. Allison?
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Staunton?
Here.
Commissioner Brindle?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Chair Hovland?
Here. Next portion of the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda itself. Is there anyone that wishes to modify the meeting agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as shown.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion second to adopt the meeting agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Community comment. Anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on a matter of concern to them relative to anything that's not on the agenda this morning? Okay. Seeing no one coming forward, hearing nothing, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We've got a few items on the consent agenda. Is there any member or any commissioner that wishes to pull an item off the consent agenda? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to adopt the consent agenda. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then on to reports and recommendations. And Stephanie Hawkinson has the first matter before us this morning in that portion of the agenda, which is a proposed pilot program involving one of the issues around affordable housing that we've been concerned about. And good morning, Ms. Hawkinson.
First item is I am introducing a new pilot program. I was hoping to have you be able to review the grant agreement, but as of 10 o'clock last night, the attorneys were still negotiating some of the details. So I will be bringing this forward before the City Council in early August. The sources of funds are the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which are controlled by the City Council, but it's a new housing program, so I wanted to come here and present this to you all for review and approval. The pilot program will be in partnership with the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust Homes Within Reach program. As you know, the Land Trust model serves households with low and moderate incomes to achieve home ownership. The Land Trust model works because it removes the land value from the site acquisition, thus reducing the acquisition price. The land remains with the land trust, but is leased back to the homeowner for their use. When the homeowner goes to sell the house, they are selling the house only and not the land. The sales price of the house is also reduced, with the homeowner only able to keep 35% of the equity. So over time, the house becomes increasingly affordable. So with this comparison, I have an example of a land trust model compared to a conventional model. With the conventional model, the initial sales price of a home is, let's say, $245,000. I know that's optimistic, but for the sake of argument. Whereas the price of the house itself is $145,000. After 10 years, through a conventional transaction, the home sells for $329,000 plus. But through the land trust model, with the value of the land removed from the equation, the homeowner only able to retain 35% of the equity, the sales price of the house is $162,000. So a land trust home becomes increasingly affordable over time, as is evidenced by the slide on the right, or the graph on the right. And so if you put that out over a land trust model is a 99, they hold the land for 99 years. So if you bring that out over time, the growth of the value of the home and what would sell to subsequent homeowners decreases at a lot slower rate than if you were a conventional model where the prices can go up in this market pretty rapidly. So what is this pilot program? The program is for program participants to sell the land beneath their home to land trusts and enter into a land lease. The money from the land sale will be used to address deferred maintenance and health and safety issues on the home. And it will also be used to pay late mortgage payments, property tax, and utility bills, if any. and the remaining funds will be placed in escrow. When the program participant sells the house, it'll already be in the land trust and sold to an income-qualified homeowner. So here's an example. If we had a $350,000 home, the house value is $185,000, the land value is $165,000. So with the money, we would buy the land from the homeowner for $165,000. With that $165,000, rehab could, for example, be $85,000. Project expenses, operating the program, and things like getting an appraisal, closing costs, doing some, if there's lead paint, doing some of those testing, roughly $20,000. If they're delinquent on the bills, utility, property tax, $50,000. Then fees to the land trust would be $5,000. And if there's anything left over after all health and safety and bills are paid, the homeowner can keep it. I mean, it's their land, they're selling it. They can, it was something that I was negotiating with the land bank or the land trust, because usually the homeowner doesn't get to see the proceeds. And I thought, if everything else is paid for, why not? And if they want to spend it on remodel, painting, or if they want to go to Hawaii, it's their money, they sold the land. But there are some spending criteria. And again, to reiterate, we really want to make sure, since we're placing this in a land trust and it's supposed to be the home available for an income-eligible homeowner in the future, we really want to make sure that how code, health and safety issues with deferred maintenance are addressed. Program goals: preserves home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income households, makes it possible for the current homeowner to remain in their home with maintenance issues addressed, retains community and homeowner wealth, enhances residential stability, and preserves the housing. The housing cannot be sold to a developer. It cannot be torn down. It preserves the house. So you're thinking, is there a need in Edina? I mean, this is great. If it's modeled after a program in Minneapolis, the situation there may be different. Is there any audience here? Well, it's a pilot. Don't know for sure. But when talking to VEEP, Senior Community Services, the Edina Resource Center, Meals on Wheels, the State Energy Assistance Program, we learned that there are people, homeowners in Edina, who are really living on the financial edge. I was surprised to learn that in Edina, 262 households were determined eligible energy assistance benefits. You have to income qualify for that to be able to pay your energy bill. And we had that many in 2018. So there are people here, and they own homes, and they are struggling to make ends meet. And because if the things are so on a margin, we are fearful that there are some deferred maintenance issues going on in these homes. I had a call from a woman who thought she had to sell her home because a tree fell in the backyard, and she didn't have the $5,000 to pay for the removal. So she's going to put her house for sale. So this is, again, a partnership. So our role would be to authorize and execute a grant agreement. Now, again, the funding would come from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was approved by ordinance, so that's city council approval of the grant agreement. Marketing and outreach, we would participate in intake interviews, review applications, approve the reimbursement requests, and track funding. And Walt, the land trust, would do the bulk of the work. They would do intake interviews, inspect the property, see if it's an eligible homeowner, see if it's an eligible house, that there's not too much deferred maintenance, that the house really should probably go, that it has some life to it. They would be communicating with the homeowner, they'd be hiring the contractors, they'd be paying the contractors. And they would be managing the land lease in the future. So I will be seeking $825,000 in the pilot. We think that would be between 4 and 6 homes, aiming for 5. But depending on the land value, depending on the level of maintenance that is needed. and there you have it. So it's, it's a little bit out of the box. I was charged with trying to find a program to help preserve single-family homes, to keep them affordable for the long run. And it's a fairly significant amount of money for a fairly few number of homes, units. But it's long-term. It's to keep these affordable, not for 30 years, not for 15 years, but up to 99 if the house, clearly the house has to last that long as well. But the land would still be in the land trust, so even if the house didn't make it, we would work with trying to replace an affordable home on that site down the road. I'll be retired. So this is to try to address and see if there's an appetite. When I talked with those other nonprofits, they were like, yes, this would be great. Get a brochure and we'll market it. We have people coming all the time. Now, the risk is they're selling their land in the beginning. So when they go to sell their home, they're going to have a reduced sale price because they got some of the money up front that they put back in the home. And so when they go to sell it, it's in a land trust. They're not going to get full private market pricing on the home. That they need to go in with their eyes wide open. So it won't be for everyone. Some people won't want it. But some people have said, I've raised my family in this home and I want it preserved. So it's a thin slice of pie.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Fisher.
All right. So thank you for that presentation. So what's different about the current program that exists with the land trust? The difference here with this pilot is that rather than my understanding of the land trust is that it's like if a house goes for sale, you go and try and buy the house in the open market and put it in the land trust. This is sort of combining that concept with folks that might be in a sort of a distressed situation where they're at risk of losing their house or they're not able to keep it up the way they might want to. Is that correct?
That's correct.
My observation?
Chair, Commissioners, in the current model, the land trust finds homes that are on MLS, have a for sale sign, and it has to meet certain criteria for them to be able to buy it, but they're competing against everyone else who's looking for a home. Okay. So this is to try to get ahead of the game a little bit.
So one of your very last comments, you talked about somebody might, when they get to the sale of their home, they're not going to get what they might perceive they're going to get. So it occurs to me that there's a potential risk, that this can be a very helpful program for folks in the position they're in here, but how do we not be perceived as just another predatory, call it lender or something, it's like, well, we helped you out, but now, you're not going to get your full value later. And we all understand exactly that. How do we make sure that's communicated, that somehow it's being signed off on, that everyone sort of understands the rules of the game?
Chair, Commissioners, we would have to be completely and utterly transparent. Lay out the numbers, show them, have them sign off. It's a voluntary program. We would not be knocking on doors and saying, hey, why don't you do this? We would market it and then have them come to us. If it's people through Veep who are going to say, I can't pay my property taxes, this is the third year in a row that I've struggled, then they'd say, there's this program, and then we would talk to them thoroughly and explain that to them. So we'd have to be utterly transparent.
Thank you.
Other questions? Member Brindle, Commissioner Brindle.
Thank you. So the challenge of preserving single-family homes is exactly that. It's a challenge. And this is when I read this, it's innovative and it's a first crack at it. And It looks really interesting. Now, the table of numbers that you presented this morning is information that we didn't have in our packet. And so I need to understand the 35%. So why 35% and not 65% or 85%? I don't understand that number. Is that just for the person who we helped stay in their home? Or is that if when they decide it's time to sell their home, it gets sold as affordable as a land trust home? Is the 35% there then? Is the 35% just there as part of this transaction? I don't understand 35%.
Chair, Commissioners, that's pretty standard with the land trusts everywhere. It's to keep the home increasingly affordable over time, that they get to keep only a portion of the equity. 35% seems to be fairly standard across the land trusts. So it's the model that they've been using, and that's the number they've been using with all their land trust homes. And it's forevermore.
Okay, so it's 35% of what?
Of the equity. So let's say that the house went from, the value of the house alone. So when you get an appraisal and they split apart the land and the house, increase in value by $100,000. They don't get to keep that increment, that increase in value on the house. They only get to keep 35% of it. So when they sell the home and sell this example for $245,000, they sell it for $180,000. So they get to keep 35% of that increase in value. The remainder, it's appraised at a certain value, stays with the land. So they don't get to walk away with that $100,000 in increase in value on the house itself. And that's forevermore. I mean, that's the land trust model.
So how does that help them?
They get some of the appreciation in the home, but they don't,
all right, so they get 100% of what the home is still worth, and then they get 35% of the increased depreciation.
No.
Because
I don't think so.
I mean,
The land's owned by the trust, so the house itself sells, they only get 35% of the equity proceeds in the house.
because that's why
Because they still may have a
I'm wondering,
mortgage.
how does that help them? How are they able to move forward and buy another home?
it's one of the trade-offs with the land trust model, is that it's an ability to stay in your home, or in the more traditional sense, buy a home where you would not be able to buy a home at all. When you're a renter, you don't get any equity. And so this
Right.
And so this is a mechanism for allowing people to either, in this case, stay in their home, so they don't lose their home outright. And they get to stay in there longer with all the maintenance issues addressed because they sold the land and the proceeds from the land. And they get some wealth building, but it's not the wealth building.
They get some of the increase in equity,
But
but
not
they
all of
don't get all of it. Okay, all right. I've been trying to wrestle with the 35%, and I was having trouble with that, but I think the bulb just went on. So a home in this program can't be torn down in the future, now or in the future, once it's in this program, and it can't be sold to a developer.
Correct.
Okay. So those are two pieces that were hard to wrestle before because they're property right. And okay, so let's say, for example, that we put our house on the market and we see it as a candidate for this program, kind of paying it forward toward keeping it affordable for the future. I don't know if anybody would do this, but this is something I thought of. So could we then come and say we would like our property considered for this program? Could that work for a current homeowner who's going to sell their home?
Chair, Commissioners, yes. It's
Okay.
not, we didn't design it that way, but I would not be opposed to that being an option for this. I think that'd be a rare case,
Okay.
but I would not be turning that away.
Okay. Looking at the checklist of, let's say, for example, you're working with a family and there's a checklist of items that has to happen. The budgeting class is a requirement, so I'd like to see that added to the checklist.
Okay.
Because I think that when an individual is in a position where this is the way they're going to stay in their home, I think that finance education and help consulting with them is important, and I think we need to make sure that happens. So I think I would like to see that added to the checklist.
Can do.
So what happens when a person comes forward and wants to be part of this program and is denied? What are their options?
Chair, Commissioners, I think we would work with them on, they would continue with their services through VEAP and others, or we'd direct them, if they're not, on some financial counseling. The reasons they would not be eligible is if the house was there was too many issues with it and the rehab needs far exceeded the value of the land, and so it didn't work economically, there's too many problems, or if the house was too expensive, so subsequent buyers could not afford the home. So there are income ranges that would work, or value ranges that work, or if the homeowner, existing homeowner also has to be income qualified, and if they weren't income qualified. So there'd be a few reasons on why it would not be accepted. And, there's situations for why they're not accepted could vary, in which case we'd talk to them about those.
All right. So typically, if a person who qualifies for homes within reach is looking for a home, and I've talked to, I have the good fortune to know several who live in homes within reach homes, both here in Edina and other cities. And the way they found out about the program was through their real estate agent when they were looking for the house. And they got referred to the program and found a house that fit them in a lot of ways, including financial. And they're very grateful for that. So in looking at how this program is administered, so these would become homes within reach homes, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. So are they going to be working with the city of Edina, or are they going to work directly with the folks at Homes Within Reach?
Chair, Commissioners, they would be working directly with Homes Within Reach.
Okay.
They have the expertise.
Okay. So our participation in this is what?
Money.
It's just money? Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Staunton.
So that's a good segue. On your memo, there's a budget action item on the first page that walks through the current balance, leaves with the ending balance. Can you just kind of summarize that? I'm trying to get a sense of where the money we've accumulated, where we're spending it, where we plan on spending it in the future.
Chair, Commissioners, the source of funds is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and through ordinance we created the trust fund this winter, and the source that goes in that are the buy-in from the Affordable Housing Policy. So thus far we've collected, or will be collecting shortly, 160 is still outstanding, but a little over $2 million of buy-in funds. There was a pledge made to Nolan Maines for $800,000, and that we anticipate will be paid late autumn. The 4D program that I received approval on last November, we pledged 160. We didn't have any takers the first round. I'm going to try again. So I'm hoping to not relinquish those funds until we give another go at it. So that was the 160, and then this program. So right now, based on the buy-in funds that we've had so far, we have 375,000 remaining.
Does the trust fund ordinance talk about how we make decisions about how we're going to spend the buy-in money, what criteria we use, et cetera?
Chair, Commissioners, the ordinance says that the funds have to be used for affordable housing purposes.
But that's the level of detail. I know we had a discussion in conjunction with a request, I think it might have been the Aon project. This was probably a year ago or so, where we talked about, it was the beginning of a conversation about what criteria we're going to use to decide what we're going to invest in projects or not. And I think this is a really creative approach, but my concern is, how does it fit together with everything else? Or is it the next thing along the line? And is there something we can't do because we're going to do this? And obviously now that we're down to 375,000, there probably is something we can't do because we're going to do this. And so for me, the policy question is just, how does this fit into the broader scheme? Do we have a broader scheme yet? And if not, are we, by investing in this pilot, are we foregoing something else that might be more bang for the buck, might be a higher priority? Have we even decided what those priorities are, et cetera?
Chair, Commissioners, one thing about the source of the money, it's really flexible. The buy-in funds, there aren't any federal legal strings attached to it. We also have the Southdale 2 TIF pool funds that have lots of strings attached. So this seemed like a source where you can try out something to meet the goals. I have heard in the year I've been here that we need to address single-family ownership affordability. And so for a year, I've been racking my brain on trying to figure out how to address single-family ownership affordability. And you can't, it's very, very challenging using TIF pooled funds on single-family ownership. So since this is a flexible source, this seemed like an opportunity to try something. Will it be wildly successful? I don't know. I mean, I hope so, but I don't know. But we won't know unless we try. And I don't know what the next best thing is, but it seems like we have to try and see what works, see what sticks. I mean, it has some legs. There is some history of this type of program working in Minneapolis, so it wasn't completely out of thin air.
Yeah, and I applaud the creativity, and I agree. I mean, I think your job is to keep giving us opportunities to try new creative things. We've been doing a lot of good things on that front. I think just for us, the question is, how does it fit into the bigger picture, and what's, from a policy perspective, how do we sort out these various options?
Manager Neal the executive director has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Staunton, we think ultimately the question you're asking is going to be resolved somewhat by our Housing Strategy Task Force. Our question at the staff level is whether we just tread water from now till then. We think that's not a good strategy, that there are some things that we can look at other communities that seem to have worked and try to emulate them here, or build models of them that can work here. And so we are trying to find valid and effective uses of the funds that we have and try to provide some benefit to the community and to families within the community all the way up until when we do have a strategy, and we think we'll have funds to fund that strategy then too.
Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, and thank you for thinking through this. This is a head scratcher. I've read this stuff a lot over the last couple of days. And I have some questions that you may not be able to answer this morning, but we could assemble that information if not. How many homes are held in that land trust today?
Chair, Commissioner Anderson, I believe there are 14 homes that are in Homes Within Reach Land Trust since 2007.
Are they in?
In Edina, right?
2009?
In Edina?
In Edina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's many, many more outside
Okay.
of Edina.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Then, in moving through, there's so many laudable goals here in this program and things that we can embrace with outstanding impact on some people. And I think that the application process and reviewing it is a really solid one. I think that it's comprehensive, it's very good. The equity formula is a little murky to me, and it's understandable, but I struggle with it in terms of how that affects not only the initial homeowner that would be dealt with, but also successive homeowners. Because if I try to tie this into how this retains community and homeowner wealth, I look to it and say, if we have $165,000 site acquisition, that site acquisition would be among the lowest that would be available here anywhere. Because I'm assuming that the owners of the properties that might be attracted to this program would probably own properties in significant disrepair, functionally obsolescent in some ways, just because of income limitations, deferred maintenance, as you mentioned. So I look at that and say, okay, is there any possibility that X number of these homes have mortgages? And then maybe does that contribute to the financial circumstances of those owners? If so, then we have to deal with a mortgage. If it's a $75 or $100 or $150 or $200,000 mortgage, that 165 doesn't really cover that. We have to deal with that. So I look at that and think, well, okay, so if this homeowner is in financial straits and they receive $165,000, they might get a little more, there might be some at the end, their equity is limited in the future. Here's the potential, because the properties themselves almost have to be free and clear to fit in under this program. There can't be a mortgage of much at all. I mean, a few thousand, 50, something, in order for us to deal with it within this 165 or so. So that's a pretty narrow pool when we get there. And I look at people who are in those straits and I think, well, they have the potential here of a net worth, even though it's locked into equity, of a net worth of, say, 250 or 300 or 350 in that area. So I'm trying to figure out, and I would reflect Commissioner Fisher's comments as well, how does that seem fair to that initial homeowner? But we're also seeking to solve a longer-term problem, and that's part of it. But is it at the expense of the person who has the most trouble today? And I think that really needs to be taken into consideration. I have experience with land leases. The Centurion Corporation, I want to say that this is 35 years ago, had a couple of projects where they tried to do land leases. And they were initially successful. The projects themselves sold, but what was discovered is that it was very, very difficult to convey title down the road. Lenders are not necessarily philanthropic organizations, and they don't necessarily have workarounds. If we have sources of mortgage funds which can finance properties such as these down the road, taking into consideration the land lease aspect, then I think we'd have a more workable formula. But for the most part, lenders just don't want a land lease. They want clear title, and so I think that's a complicating factor when we look down the road. And as Commissioner Staunton mentions, we're soaking up a significant portion of the existing trust fund with this program. And before I commit those dollars there, it feels to me as if we want to explore a little further and say, are we getting leverage with this program? We're affecting 5 homes, and it seems to me like it's going to be a struggle to find those 5. So if we commit those funds in this way, it's a fair question to say, what aren't we doing or what can't we do? And do we have alternatives that give us far better leverage? It's a question more than anything else. I wonder, I'd love to see a case study. I'd like to see something that has moved through a generation or so. I'd like to know what has happened here with some of those that are held in a land trust where title has been conveyed, where these repairs have been made, the disposition of the parties involved, what happened, so we can have a better handle on that. And it occurs to me as an alternative. If one of the things we're trying to do is to assist homeowners in need to bring their property up to a certain standard, we might find a good portion of this $825,000, which could be set aside that could aid those folks with the same type of application process, where we wind up with a lien on it for that amount. And then it's entirely possible, and I think that we have a good option of a land trust, even here locally, where we can control that a little bit better, hold those assets within our community, and also create affordability options into the future. And I'd love to talk to you about that at some point in time, because I think there's some good options in there. With all of that said, I'd like to have more time to think through this, to really see, what more can we do here and address these same needs, or at least limit our funding here to, say, one property. Let's see if this works. Let's see if we can move down the road a little bit. Let's see if we can locate the property. Let's see what happens through the application process, as opposed to saying, let's commit $825,000 and then we'll find them, we hope, and over the course of time. In the meantime, these dollars can probably be put to some use that falls into this area. I think that's it, but thanks again for thinking through this. I know it's very complicated.
A couple of points that I'd like to inquire about or make. So we got 14 homes in Edina that are homes within reach homes at the present time. Do you know how many of those houses have been resold?
Chair, Commissioners, 2.
2? All right. And is anyone that's presently in a home within reach, do we know whether there is anyone in financial distress?
Chair, I am not aware of anyone that is.
Okay. And the 2 resales have been successful resales and they continue to be affordable?
First of all, I believe it's 2. I'm working on memory here. From my understanding, yes.
Okay. So Commissioner Fisher mentioned this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that Commissioner Anderson talked about too, but the historic Walt model is to buy a house on the market. Walt owns the land, sells the house, but it's after a financial qualification of the people that are involved. And so when you tell me that you haven't heard of anybody living in a Walt homes within reach home that is having financial difficulty, I believe that representation on your part, because I think that with the financial pre-qualification that goes along with it, it makes a big difference. Because what's proposed here is a program for existing homeowners that are having problems making ends meet. And if you add in the component that Commissioner Anderson is talking about, that not only are they having trouble paying their utility bills and property taxes, but they've got some kind of a mortgage, and the odds are they do have a mortgage. Because I think if they had a house free and clear, there's some people that would live there and absorb that sort of financial distress, but a lot of people would just think about selling it and pulling what equity is out of there. In Edina, the median price home is $540,000. So it all begs for me the question of more information, because like Commissioner Anderson, I'm also in favor of thinking about this land trust model as a local model, not just combining resources with West Hennepin Land Trust. But why wouldn't we use our own housing foundation to run a pilot if we eventually decided a pilot was important to do? I just think there have been some great points raised here this morning. And when I think about a situation where what's being discussed here is really you're telling people you're going to come in and help them get rid of that financial distress that they have. And I'm looking at that one category. And I didn't see anything in here that involved sort of a financial analysis of what their problems are. And you listed some of the things that they could be experiencing, and property tax problems. You didn't talk about they're way off on their mortgage payments. They're way behind on their mortgage payments. Mm-hmm. I think that's the most likely scenario. And I've had to deal with in my professional life in a few circumstances where I've had to try to get a mortgage company to rewrite a loan to accommodate an income level on a house, one house recently that was inherited, and where the relatives were going to continue to live there, but they couldn't live there unless we got some kind of an adjustment on the mortgage and some certainty over the long term that the mortgage wouldn't have a lot of variability in it, so that with an ARM product, you got to be really careful in terms of being able to afford it over time, as if your wages don't keep pace with what the changes are in the mortgage amount that's due monthly. So I just think that there are still a lot of unanswered questions, and then you overlay that with the thoughts of Commissioner Staunton that, well, wait a minute, what's our grand plan here? How are we going to use these resources that we have? Because they can go in a hurry. And we can see that, and our best intentions are to try to get the biggest bang for the buck. And certainly, single-family home ownership is part of that overview. But I'm personally not ready to act on this matter this morning, and it sounds like Commissioner Anderson isn't either. And I'm hearing concerns about other folks on the HRA as well, believing that we need to think this through a little bit more. Despite our efforts to try to do something about this problem now, and your creativity in trying to figure out how to help us do something about it, which I think was, like everybody else said, is that's the reason you're here, is to bring ideas to us and let us vet them and figure out what we want to do. So thank you for that. So we had a presentation with Ms. Hawkinson. The motion was to approve $825,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Funds to implement this pilot program on housing preservation. Is there anyone that cares to make that motion? Yeah, that's what I suspected. Okay. So let's continue the dialogue here. Let us think it through a little bit too, and that might cause us to come up with some ideas individually as well on how we can address this home ownership issue.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Yes,
I think
Commissioner Fisher.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think that I really, and I know all of us up here really appreciate the innovative thought and creativity that is behind this. And I think this is kind of our first brush at it. Mm-hmm. And there are, I really will be good to think this through and continue talking about it and learning about it. But it has just huge potential. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brindle. Commissioner Fisher.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, you sort of hit on this. Your job is to bring us creative ideas. And I just have to say, you're doing an exceptionally good job at your job. It warms my heart to see your passion at 7:30 in the morning. I can tell you just love trying to solve these problems, and I'm thankful for that. And I don't feel we're ready to execute this idea right now, but I'm not hearing that we shouldn't be, that it's not an idea that we should be executing. Right? It just needs to be vetted further, and I think our job is to sort of poke all the holes and to look at it from this big policy level and make sure that we're spending every dollar to the best of its ability. So I feel good that we now have another idea. I mean, months ago, we're sitting here thinking, how are we, what are the answers on the single family home side of things? And I feel like we have something here now, and whether or not it's the exact right thing or it needs to be tweaked a little this way or that way, I feel more hope that when we decide to deploy funds into the single family home category, that this is a creative way to do it. And so I feel like we're moving the ball here, and I don't think this is an idea that's going to die and go away, but I think we got to kind of make sure it fits within the broader spectrum here. So thank you for that.
Thanks. And then you have the next matter as well, and that is potential acquisition of property at 7075, 7079 Amundsen Avenue.
Good morning. This one is very different than the last. It's a little bit more within wheelhouse of what we've done before. So today I am seeking authorization to engage legal counsel to draft necessary documents for the acquisition and disposition of 7075, 7079 Amundsen Avenue. You've seen this project before. It is the old Waldorf-Nevin site in the 70th and Cahill Small Area Plan study area. Last July, a year ago, the Edina Housing Foundation acquired the property and went through a rigorous proposal process and selected MWF Properties to be the developer of 100% affordable housing. And they entered into a purchase agreement in January. So you all know the reason I'm here is to help with the vision of increasing affordable housing in Edina. It was in the 2015 Vision Edina plan. It was mentioned in quality of life surveys. Most recently in 2019, one comment was people who work in Edina cannot afford to live in Edina. And so with over 50% of residents saying that there is not the availability of affordable quality housing. So we know that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. The small area plan for this area mentions affordable housing, so it's compliant with small area plan. You've already been through that when you looked at the site. And I have, some of this is really repeat, and I think just to keep the education generally of affordable housing forefront is the rents for affordable housing are not sufficient to leverage enough debt. So there's government involvement in the creation of affordable housing. My title, I can work on housing generally, but if it's market rate and complies with all zoning and regulations, there's really no need for government involvement that much. With affordable housing, because the rents cannot leverage the debt that's needed to build it, we become involved. Government becomes involved. And so I had mentioned in an earlier presentation to you that debt financing, depending on the project, can account for between 20 and 70% of the total development costs. So with the Amundsen Flats, the total development budget is roughly $17 million. Of that, $5 million is first mortgage. They're applied for tax credits. We'll hear in December. And with the tax credit equity, they hope it's another $10 million. There is a $700,000 gap in the financing for this development. Currently, for the application to MHFA, the Edina Housing Foundation said that they would fill that gap through a land sale write-down. With the foundation, they have a finite amount of money. And so if they provide that land sale write-down of $700,000, they don't get it back. It's gone. They can't, whatever, what their come home to Edina mortgage, whatever they do for affordable housing, that money cannot be recouped. So we are seeking to see if the HRA will acquire the site from the foundation and honor the $700,000 write-down to MWF. And so the gap would be provided by the HRA rather than by the foundation. Reason we did a land sale write-down and not a straight financial award to MWF was a lot having to do with the pointing system. Minnesota Housing you get your 9% tax credits based on points. Those with the most points get the tax credits, and there's a finite amount of tax credits. So the one category is efficient use of resources. So one is cost containment, and another is other contributions that aren't financial. Land sale write-down allowed for them to get points and other contributions, and it also reduced the acquisition price so they were able to get cost containment points. So that made the application more competitive. So that's why we're looking at a land sale rather than a cash donation. So the Edina Housing Foundation acquired the site for $1 million, a little bit more. They've been paying property tax, holding costs. They secured and winterized the site, seeking to have the HRA acquire it from the foundation for $1.3 million. The costs we checked, and it could be under our insurance, our current liability insurance, and that would not be an extra charge until a year from now. Correct? Correct. And then at the time we get the financial award, they close on their financial closing with MWF, then the HRA would sell it to MWF for $600,000. Why? This helps facilitate the creation of new affordable housing. The HRA would maintain site control, so if they didn't get the financing, then the HRA would have control to seek another developer. It makes the Housing Foundation whole financially so they can continue on with their mission. And we would be using TIF pooling. So we would not be using the Affordable Housing Trust Fund with the buy-in funds, but we'd be using the Southdale 2 TIF. Did I miss one? Risks. Since those funding sources that would be used, you would have to use affordable housing. If we use the Southdale TIF funds, we'd have to, even if MWF doesn't move forward and the HRA, I'm pretty confident they're gonna get financing. But that would be a risk, is that it would have to be affordable housing here. You would lose the interest that the Southdale funds are currently earning, and you then have the property. So the financing awards, we've heard it's been delayed to December, and then in 2020, so you'd hold the property for about a year. But there's an option with that. You don't have to get, the foundation is fine with maintaining title. So the HRA we could delay the closing of the HRA getting title to the property later. So they would maintain title, but prior to the closing with MWF, then do the title switch between the foundation and the HRA. So I would like the authorization to seek legal assistance in creating the purchase agreement between the Edina Housing Foundation and the HRA, and then to work on the purchase agreement between the HRA and MWF Properties.
Good. Questions for Ms. Hawkinson? Member Fisher?
So to way oversimplify everything you just said, I'm understanding one of the greatest benefits of this is the HRA is able to tap the TIF pooling resources, which the Housing Foundation is not able to tap. And it allows the Housing Foundation to have retained some funds to do other good work, right? So we're trying to maximize the sources, and we are the home of that TIF source. Is that a?
That is correct.
Okay. Is there any, I guess we wouldn't be taking on any risk that our Housing Foundation isn't already taking on in terms of, owning a site for some period of time that's got a dry clear on it and whatever else, that all of those mitigating circumstances are already sort of with us through the Housing Foundation?
That is also correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, thank you. A couple questions, just structural questions. Who maintains the property here in the interim? Does that continue to be the developer, or if we own it? Let me start over. Okay. Do we anticipate simultaneous closings with the developer and the Housing Foundation? Is that the idea?
Chair Commissioner Anderson, that is one way we could structure it. We could delay the closing with the HRA until we're going to close with the developer. We could have it immediately precede the closing with the developer.
Under that scenario, we're not committing the funds until that time. We're committing the funds today, but we're not making those available until that closing. We don't buy it, actually. We buy it on a pass-through basis at that time. Accurate?
Chair Commissioner Anderson, that is correct. I would want to proceed with the purchase agreement.
Sure.
But we don't have to proceed with closing.
Okay. We could even do that with an LOI, potentially, as opposed to a purchase agreement?
I would prefer a
Okay.
purchase agreement.
All right, fair enough.
Assuming the purchase agreement that the foundation has with MWF, there's more protections for both the buyer and the seller in a purchase agreement.
Okay. And then who maintains this in the interim? We've got a year or so out.
Chair Commissioner Anderson, it would be the responsibility of the foundation.
Okay, and they're okay with that?
They're okay with that. Quite honestly, they have engaged Public Works, and then Public Works would be invoicing the foundation.
Okay.
As a partner, as a good partner to our Housing Foundation, we effectively do the maintenance work
Yeah,
at the site.
okay. Just trying to get clarity on
So
that.
what you're saying is that Appendix B, where it shows that every fifth week one of us has to mow, that is not option one. That is like something different.
That's something you can negotiate, sir.
I'm gone every fifth week. Okay, so I got sidetracked here. Last question. It was a good one, but I'll come back. Okay, yeah, thank.
Commissioner Brindle?
Thank you. If you would go back in the slideshow that you have to the spreadsheet. Oh, that one, right there. Okay. So the Edina Housing Foundation bought the property for $1,030,000. And if the HRA buys it from the Edina Housing Foundation, we would pay $1.3 million. Why would we pay them more than they paid?
Chair Commissioner Brindle, they have been paying property taxes on the site. Their costs that they have accrued, it far exceeds
Okay.
$1.3 million.
All right, I just wanted that to be clear.
Yeah.
That while if this were to go through, we would be paying $1.3 million and make sure that there's a clear understanding that they're not making money on this sale if this were to happen.
Chair Commissioner Brindle, that is correct. They have been paying the property tax. They paid over $10,000 to board up the building and to clear the brush behind it. They have put some costs into it. There have been environmental reports and investigations that have occurred, so they have accumulated some costs.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Staunton?
So, in the big picture, is this the sum total of the city, whether the city is the foundation or the HRA or the city council? Is this the sum total of the subsidy the city would be contributing to this project?
Chair, Commissioner Staunton, at this juncture, yes. I do not want to say, I don't want to shut the door because construction costs are escalating. I think my colleague, Mr. Neuenberg, would agree with me that construction costs he's seen have been increasing. I have talked to MWF. They have no updates on their numbers until it goes out for bid. So I don't want to say, I won't want to put a hard line there, but yes, at this juncture, we believe the only subsidy that they will be seeking from either the foundation or the HRA or the city council is that $700,000 write down.
Right, so the costs, the sources and uses they're presenting for as part of their application for the tax credits, this is the gap and we would be filling it and this is the mechanism that we would fill it.
That is correct.
And there's 62 affordable units in this project.
That is correct.
So for $700,000, and we're at what, $12,000, $11,000 per unit?
door.
Okay.
Correct.
Pretty good bang for the buck. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Anderson, did that question roll back into your head?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Okay, it was really just about, actually, Commissioner Staunton asked that question. So this is the sum total. We don't anticipate a TIF application down the road.
There, Chair, Commissioner Anderson, there is no request for TIF.
And these funds are readily available through Southdale 2, and they're designated for that purpose.
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Director Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. We as staff really believe that this project is almost the quintessential project that HRAs were established to get involved in, to help redevelop a problematic piece of property into a new use that the community has told us and that you've told staff is important for the future of the town. It's gone through a number of regulatory hoops already, so we think it is ready to move it forward. We hope you support it today. Particularly something you should think about as HRA policymakers is that we were successful this past legislative session in getting an extension to our authority over the Southdale 2 TIF proceeds. That gives us an additional 30 months, Mr. Neuendorf, from now, 29 maybe?
His name is Neuenberg.
Mr. Neuendorf.
I'm sorry, Bill.
So when you think about the additional funds that we have available to spend on this important community need, we really have a very limited time frame in which to maximize the potential of that investment. So we think this is a very good use of these funds, and we hope you support it today.
Thank you. I didn't expect that sales pitch, but that's all right. When you showed that slide about risks, I was sitting there thinking, well, those are really opportunities because those are keeping that property for affordable uses is right in our wheelhouse. That's what we want to be doing. So, us holding the property, to me, this was a good thing. And to be able to use, as you point out, some of the Southdale 2 TIF funds, which, as you characterized in your other presentation, have many restrictions attached, is a wonderful opportunity, I think, to be able to step in here and free up some money for the Housing Foundation and let us step into our role, as the executive director said, as the HRA on a project that's really worthwhile. So I'm prepared to support your recommendation this morning. And I think others are as well, based on how the questioning went. So is there a motion to authorize staff to draft legal documents for the Housing and Redevelopment Authority to acquire 7075 through 7079 Amundsen Avenue from the Edina Housing Foundation and sell it to MWF Properties LLC. And I think I would add with a simultaneous closing, and that where we would enter into the purchase agreement now, the closing would be set to take place as mentioned simultaneously by Commissioner Anderson, or in sequence, and that the foundation would continue to be responsible for the property until the closing occurs.
So
Is there
moved.
a motion to that effect? Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and second with respect to the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Good. Excellent. And then we are going to have the executive director give us an update on some projects.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a couple updates for you this morning. One specific on Pentagon Village, and then the second is just the project update that we periodically provide to the HRA during these meetings. The second one we provide to you really without much presentation. If there was something in that group of projects that you had a question on that you wanted to pose to us today, we'd certainly do our best to answer that. But the more specific update on Pentagon Village, I'd like to ask Mr. Neuendorf if he would provide that update to the HRA.
Happy to do that. Yes, Bill Neuendorf, Economic Development. I wanted to provide this update on the Pentagon Park, the Pentagon Village project, primarily because...
Ms. Hockenberg, thank you for that qualification.
Primarily because we reached a major milestone, a milestone that the community and the developer have been working towards for more than 5 years. So just a few weeks ago, on Friday, July 12th, we issued the 3 tax increment financing notes to support that Pentagon Village site, the Pentagon South property. Those notes were issued in accordance with the redevelopment agreement that we entered into in October of 2018. And if you've driven by the site or kept an eye on it, there's been a flurry of activity ever since the developer secured those final approvals, secured the TIF agreement last summer and then last October. So the site has been transformed from a rolling piece of dirt to at least a shiny, fixed-up piece of dirt. All the site infrastructure is in place. All the underground pipes, utilities, networking is in place. The curbs and gutters, the pavement of all those internal roads, the reconstruction of the public streets, and then the most expensive item has been the construction of a shared parking ramp. So several years ago, the term shovel-ready sites came to be a very popular term. And with the investment that the developer has made, he now has 5 shovel-ready pads to start construction on. So these tax increment notes, the TIF notes, are used as pledges to recognize first and foremost that the developer spent the money that he said he was going to spend, and secondly that he built the things he said he would build with that money. So we wanted to document that with the TIF notes. Now that gets us, it's seen as a pledge, but we don't pay on that pledge yet. The developer, as you can imagine, still has lots and lots of work to do. So while we've issued the notes, they're not going to begin accumulating any interest, or they won't be payable until you start seeing real buildings. And you should see those in the next few months starting to rise. He's anticipated to break ground on the retail buildings later this summer, possibly as late as September, hopefully earlier. They're under contract with the 2 hotel properties, a Marriott, a dual-branded Marriott, which is Town Place Suites and Fairfield Inn and Suites. Those will be the flags that will be operating there. That work should start this fall. A Water Walk Hotel, which is new to the Twin Cities marketplace, but it's really designed as an extended stay hotel concept. So if you are in town for 30 days or for 6 months or for 2 weeks for a job relocation, job assignment, whatever it might be, it's really intended for that type of audience. And that should break ground in September. So while there has been a lot of activity, it's met our minimum requirements, but there's still more work to do. And in the packet, I also did include a summary of much of the evidence that I went through. I met with the developer and their accountant and their team, I think 5 times this spring, to go through each and every invoice that added up to $18.1 million, just to confirm that they said that they did what they said they would do. So we walked through all the pay applications by the contractors, all the demolition costs back from 2015 that they've been sitting on those receipts for 5 years as they've been working on this deal and putting it together. So I wanted to document that. Certainly staff did go through all those invoices, make sure that they're legitimate, so that in good faith we could issue these TIF notes. So there'll be more reports in the future as you see some of the projects rising from the ground. There will also be the delivery of that public plaza, about a 1-acre public plaza, that will happen next spring. Depending on timing with the landscaping, it's built, but they probably won't get landscaping in until next spring. So we'll keep you updated on those issues. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Any questions for Mr. Neuendorf? Yeah, thanks for that report. On the project update, it was a wonderful 4-page listing of everything that's going on in Edina. The one thing I was thinking that you might add as a column would be the value of the estimated market value of the project, so that we can kind of get a running total of what we have going on in the community. I'm expecting it would be in excess of $1 billion in development going on.
We do talk about that periodically with the city assessor, so we do have some sense of what some of those projects are worth.
Okay. Or even the building permit value would be good to have. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Neuendorf or comments relative to the project update? I noticed you had an update. I thought originally that Nolan Mains was supposed to be through first phase in October, but now they're saying November 1, which is, of course, very close. Does that still look like it's feasible?
Correct, yes. The Nolan Mains, so they have move-in dates scheduled for November 1st. They'll be at this point, we're planning on turning over all the public areas, the new sidewalks, the new plazas, the new trash rooms. All that will come online November 1st. That would be for the units. That's the first building. There's a second building that's closer to Spillane. Those units will be delivered in December, so that it'll come in 2 phases. But all the public areas, public parking, public plaza, public sidewalks, November 1st is that date. Good.
And have you heard anything about how the rentals are going for them? Are they satisfied?
Yeah, so far they're pleased with the rental pace. It's still early. They don't have a unit to show at this point. They have lots of units that are partially shown. But the last time I connected, of the 100 units, they have about 20% or so pre-leased. And the closer they get, when people start actually being able to see the unit and walk through it safely without wearing hard hats and vests, that's when the leasing really will ramp up. But so far, they're at their projected pace.
Good. Anyone else have questions, comments? Commissioner Fisher?
I just want to thank you for the thoroughness of I really always enjoy reading through this report because because it's taken seriously and things are really updated and it's helpful. So thank you.
All right, Manager Neal, you had one other matter you wanted to talk about. I think it was the proposed 2020-2021 HRA levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. This is an informational item only. There's no action required for it today. But we did want to bring the HRA up to date on how we are working through our proposed 2020 HRA budget and levy. As you will recall, for some of you that have been on the HRA for a while, we've been on a steady trajectory to slowly increase the size of the levy for the HRA so that we are providing levied property tax revenue for the HRA that's linked more directly to the annual operating costs of running the HRA. So that's the personnel costs and the operating costs of this aspect of our overall business. The proposed increase for 2020 right now that we have projected in previous years, and we're projecting proposing actually for 2020 and 2021, is to increase this levy to $192,000 in 2020, and then to $230,400 in 2021. The first time you'll see this formally proposed to you is in August, and then in September we'll ask you to make a preliminary property tax levy approval that then gets produced onto truth and taxation notices that get out to residents, and then a final budget approval for the HRA and for the rest of our budgets in December. So this is just an indication of what those numbers are going to be. There's always a little play in them as we look at how our assessed values are being developed in the city assessing division, and as that gets more precise as the year goes on, we can give you more precise information about tax impacts, percentage growth from year to year, that sort of thing.
Good. That prompt any questions from any commissioners? All right. Any other business amongst the commissioners? Any other comments, commissioner comments on anything? Otherwise, then we will stand adjourned. Thank you.